welcome back to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and today I am going to be learning with you about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends. And in today's case, it is going to be a furry friend of ours because we are covering the oh so wonderful bat. Furry is not the normal word I would use to describe a bat, but of course I am limited to just those three right off the top, so I just have to get used to the fact that not every animal is going to fit into those three categories perfectly. So this is, of course, a very, very special listener episode dedicated to Hannah and Mandy, who wrote into the show. Hannah wrote in via email, while Mandy wrote in via Instagram. So this podcast episode would not be possible without your recommendations, and this podcast would not be possible without each and every single one of you out there listening and learning alongside me. If you want to have your animal on the podcast, you can write in either through email to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, or you can send a message to relaxwithanimalfacts on Instagram. I respond to each and every one of you. If ever you don't get a response, there is most likely something wrong there because I get so excited whenever I get a message. And if you want to really reach out, you can now send your fan mail to a P.O. box. So if you want to send in drawings or you want to send handwritten letters, you can absolutely do that. And to find the P.O. box, you can go to Instagram. It is right there under the highlights and under the posts. Or if you want to send me an email, I will be more than happy to give you the information you need. And every month on Patreon, I will be opening up your fan mail and answering questions. So we're going to be having our first Q&A, the Relax with Animal Facts Q&A, where I will answer whatever questions you have for me or about the show or about animals. And if I'm able to answer, I will absolutely do so. So I will be providing updates on the Instagram as to when the first Patreon Q&A will be hosted. So this 5-star review is coming from the United States, from Ka Mom, through Apple Podcasts. And Ka writes, "My 5-year-old loves animals and often falls asleep to a podcast. I love the reminders to relax. My son also loves reptiles. I blame you for a pending visit to a faraway zoo to see a Komodo dragon, and would request more episodes on reptiles, maybe king cobras. Thank you." That is such a wonderful review and such a wonderful message that makes me smile from ear to ear, even though you might have to spend a little bit on gas or travel expenses to get yourself to that far away zoo. Unfortunately for me, I think the closest zoo to find a Komodo dragon would probably be in a plane. Regardless, that was such a wonderful message and review. If you want to leave a 5-star review, I absolutely encourage you to do so. It's one of the biggest things that you can do to help the show keep growing and to help build our podcast, our animal podcast family. And it keeps growing every day, and it's so amazing. So now, before we get right into the show, I'm just going to go over the facts, where I got them from, so that if you want to research more, you are more than welcome to go to these amazing resources. In the case of today, I only got my resources from one place, and it's from DOI.gov, and there are 13 facts about bats. So I will leave the link in the show notes if you want to learn more, and I encourage you to do so. So now, enough dilly-dallying. I know I sometimes talk for some time at the top of the show, but I can only talk to you guys once a week. So sometimes, I have a lot I want to talk to you guys about. But regardless, let's get right into the show here. I want all of you to sort of scan through your body, and it doesn't matter what time of the day. Maybe it's the morning and you're making your morning coffee, or maybe it's at night and you're about to have a chamomile tea like me, or maybe it's the middle of the day, you're driving to work, you're going somewhere. Regardless of where you are, I want you to realize sort of where you are carrying some of that tension. For some of you, it might be in your neck, it might be in your shoulders, it might be in your legs. We are all very different. And in my case, as I'm going to scan along with you guys here, is that I feel it mostly in my shoulders. So I am going to do my best to relax my muscles, and you can do your best right alongside me as we go into this immersive experience together into the caves where bats reside. So the first fact is that there are over 1,400 species of bats all around the world. That is a lot of potential podcast episodes, but regardless, they can be found on nearly every part of the planet except in extreme desert conditions and polar regions. I never would have imagined bats in Antarctica in the first place, but the difference in size and shape is very impressive between these species. So while they may be the same kind as in bats, they can look very, very different. In the bat's case, for example, the Kitti's hog-nosed bat, or also called the bumblebee bat, I will have to do a podcast on them very soon. And this particular bat weighs less than a penny, making it the world's smallest animal. To the flying foxes, which can have a wingspan of up to 6 feet. So we can see that although they are both of the same kind, they are both bats. One that weighs less than a penny is going to be really hard to be compared to one that has a wingspan of up to 6 feet. But that is just the beauty of the animal kingdom. The United States and Canada are home to about 45 species of bats, and there are additional species that are found in the United States territories in the Pacific and the Caribbean as well. So we can see that there are many different species, and we have quite a few here in the West, about 45 that we are able to spot depending on where we live. This next fact, I think, is particularly important, and that is because without bats, we can say goodbye to bananas, avocados, and mangoes. For those of you that don't know, mangoes are my favorite fruit. I very much love mangoes. Bananas are probably a close second, and the avocado I also love as well. So over 300 species of fruit depend on bats for pollination. Bats help spread seeds for nuts, figs, and cacao as well, which is the main ingredient in chocolate. Without bats, we also would not have plants like agave or the iconic saguaro cactus. So here we see an example of just how fragile a certain ecosystem can be. It is the same for little insects like bumblebees, for example. The networks that are built within an environment are super crucial, and when you take one link out and it happens to be a link in the chain that is particularly relevant and important, maybe more so than other links, there can be many consequences that are experienced in that environment. So here we see just how important bats are. And not all of them hibernate. So even though bears and bats are the two most well-known hibernators, not all bats will spend their winter in caves. Some bat species, like the spotted bat, for example, will survive by migrating in search of food to warmer areas when it starts to get chilly. That is a very new fact for me. I thought that all bats hibernate, and I never would have guessed that they migrate. I had never heard of bats migrating before. Night insects have the most to fear from bats. Each night, bats can eat their body weight or more in insects, which will number in the thousands. I suppose with some of these smaller bats that weigh less than a penny, they don't have to eat too much, but it is still impressive if you take into account how much these insects weigh. So due to the fact that the insects often have exoskeletons that are made of chitin, which is a shiny material, some bat poop will sparkle in the night, which is a cool but very weird fact. And this insect-heavy diet will help foresters and farmers protect their crops from pests. So here we see sort of a natural, like a nature's pesticide in that way. And bats are the only flying mammal, and boy can they fly fast. So the flying squirrel can glide for short distances, but the bats are true flyers, and a bat's wing resembles almost kind of a human hand. If you have ever sort of spread your hands apart, and we're all different in this way, where the amount of skin there in between your fingers might be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller than the webbing of that of your neighbor or of your loved ones. Well, the bat's wing, you can sort of imagine the skin between your fingers being thinner and really stretched out and much larger. And this will allow bats to have a very flexible skin membrane in order to make flying very easy and a very agile process. So while bats may be small, some of them can fly extremely quickly. In fact, some species can reach speeds of over 100 miles an hour. For those of us that use kilometers an hour, that would be about 160 kilometers per hour. That is impressively quick. The longest living bat is 41 years old. It is said that the smaller the animal, the shorter its lifespan, and that has been true for nearly every species that we've covered. But the bat is unique in that it breaks that rule of longevity that we have established on this show. And although most bats will live less than 20 years in the wild, scientists have documented 6 species that live for more than 30 years. In 2006, a tiny bat from Siberia set the world record at 41 years of age. I think that bats have gotten quite a bad reputation, but as we can see here, they are such amazing little critters. I probably wouldn't call all bats little critters, considering that there are some out there with a 6-foot wingspan. At least I wouldn't say it to its face anyway. Conservation efforts are helping bat species recover, which is amazing. At least 13 types of bats in the United States are endangered, and more are threatened as well. These amazing animals face a multitude of threats, including habitat loss and disease, but there are conservation initiatives going on to help these little guys. In 1988, there were thought to be fewer than 1,000 lesser long-nosed bats at the 14 roosts range-wide, and now there are an estimated 200,000 bats at 75 roosts. So we see just how much these initiatives can actually do for animals, and it's always amazing to read things like that. Like cats, bats will clean themselves. They will spend a lot of their time grooming themselves. I think that many of us think of bats as being very dirty and never clean, but they do spend a lot of time in that self-care area. Besides giving them that sort of sheen or sleek fur, cleaning will also help to control parasites, which is very important. Baby bats are called pups, and a group of bats is called a colony. Like other mammals, mother bats feed their pups breast milk and not insects. So while bats only give birth to about one baby per year, mama bats will form these nursery colonies in spring in the caves, dead trees, and rock crevices in the area. So it is almost like a daycare with all the mama bats sort of there coming together. I think that's great. And bats are inspiring medical marvels. About 80 medicines come from plants that rely on bats for their survival. And while bats are not blind, studying how bats use echolocation has helped scientists develop navigational aids for the blind. And the research on bats has also led to developments and advances in vaccines. So we can see here that most of the animals that we have covered, if not all, have had a very substantial effect on us, whether we like it or not. And echolocation is one of these mechanisms that really, when you sit down, reflect, and kind of meditate on it, it is a lot to chew on. Echolocation is a very complex process that takes in a lot of information. And bats are able to detect objects as thin as a human hair in complete darkness, along with other animals that use echolocation like dolphins. I have to say that this is one of my favorites. There are a collection of blind people who show the adaptability of our amazing brains and use echolocation in their daily lives to better navigate the world. They will use kind of clicks and whistles to more accurately assess their environments. While we might not have necessarily the anatomical adaptations, just meaning we don't have certain ears and different things to allow for this mechanism to be used to its full potential, there are still a great number of people who are learning how to do this. Now, although this is amazing, I would not necessarily want to practice it out in public, and I'm not sure if I would advise any of you to do so either. If you go to the mall and close your eyes and shout and whistle and scream, you'll probably get a few odd looks your way. For the most part, let's let bats be bats. And if you want to learn more about echolocation, I have an audio course on listenable.io. So if you want to learn more, I would encourage you to go onto Listenable and listen to a more scientific and in-depth look at this topic. And for the final fact of the episode, we are going to talk about the word bat. Where does it come from? Here, you guys are going to have to follow closely because it goes back quite a bit. So we're going to start in the 1570s, in which a dialectical alteration of Middle English happens from the word backe, that's B-A-K-K-E, which is probably related to Old Swedish, natbaka, Old Danish, nathbake, which is called nightbat, and Old Norse. And I'm not going to pronounce the Norse word because there is a letter that I don't recognize, and I'm not even going to try, but it means leather flapper, which I think is great. And this goes to the Proto-Germanic. So the original sense of the animal's name, bat, was flapper, and has been associated with other things like the Latin blatta, which is a moth or nocturnal insect. It is always awesome to learn about the etymology of words, especially the names of our animals. Etymology just means the kind of history that a word has. So that is the final fact of the episode. If you want to learn about a particular animal, you can write into the show through email to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, or you can follow the Instagram Relax with Animal Facts, and you can send me a message. Even if you don't have an animal suggestion, I love to hear from you guys. I would like to thank all of you that support me as patrons on my Patreon. It means the world that you guys are supporting the show in that way through the weirdness of our current world. But regardless, thank you all for listening. I very much appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.